Hi, my name is Jim Ward of the Middle Country Public Library, and I'd like to welcome you to Episode 7 in our History Bites series. Today we will be discussing D-Day and the Allied invasion of Europe that turned the tide of World War II. After World War II began, Germany invaded and occupied northwestern France beginning in May 1940. The Americans entered the war in December 1941, and by 1942 they and the British were considering the possibility of a major Allied invasion across the English Channel to push the Germans out of France and liberate the French people. The following year, Allied plans for a cross-channel invasion began to ramp up. In November 1943, Adolf Hitler, who was aware of the threat of an invasion along France's northern coast, put Erwin Rommel in charge of spearheading defense operations in the region, even though the Germans did not know exactly where the Allies would strike. Hitler charged Rommel with finishing the Atlantic Wall, a 2,400-mile line of obstacles. This defensive wall was comprised of 6.5 million mines, thousands of concrete bunkers and pillboxes containing heavy and fast-firing artillery, tens of thousands of tank ditches, and other formidable beach obstacles. In January 1944, General Dwight Eisenhower was appointed commander of what became known as Operation Overlord. In the months and weeks before D-Day, the Allies carried out a massive deception operation intended to make the Germans think the main invasion target was Pas de Calais, the narrowest point between Britain and France, rather than Normandy. In addition, they led the Germans to believe that Norway and other locations were also potential invasion targets. Many tactics were used to carry out the deception, including fake equipment, as seen here with the dummy tank that was created. There was also a phantom army commanded by George Patton, along with double agents, fraudulent radio transmissions, and even paradummies nicknamed Rupert. After much deliberation, it was decided that the landings would take place on the long, sloping beaches of Normandy. There, the Allies would have the element of surprise. The German High Command expected the attack to come in the Pas de Calais region, north of the River Seine, where the English Channel is narrowest. It was here that Adolf Hitler put the bulk of his panzer-armed tank divisions after being tipped off by Allied undercover agents posing as German sympathizers. The challenges of mounting a successful landing were daunting. The English Channel was notorious for its rough seas and unpredictable weather, and the enemy had spent months constructing the Atlantic Wall, and the German army would be dug in on the cliffs overlooking the American landing beaches. General Dwight Eisenhower, Supreme Commander of the Allied Expeditionary Forces, delivered remarks to U.S. soldiers to encourage them before heading into battle. He said, quote, "Soldiers, sailors, and airmen of the Allied Expeditionary Force, you are about to embark upon the great crusade toward which we have striven these many months. The eyes of the world are upon you. The hope and prayers of liberty-loving people everywhere march with you. In company with our brave allies and brothers in arms on other fronts, you will bring about the destruction of the German war machine, the elimination of Nazi tyranny over the oppressed peoples of Europe, and security for ourselves in a free world." End quote. A massive airborne operation preceded the Allied amphibious invasion of the Normandy beaches. In the early hours of June 6, 1944, several hours prior to troops landing on the beaches, over 13,000 elite paratroopers of the American 82nd and 101st Airborne Divisions, along with British and Canadian paratroopers, were dropped behind enemy lines. Their job was to blow up bridges, sabotage railroad lines, and take other measures to prevent the enemy from rushing reinforcements to the invasion beaches. An additional 4,000 men, consisting of glider infantry, with supporting weapons, medical, and signal units, were to arrive in 500 gliders later on D-Day to reinforce the paratroopers. While the operation was underway, heavy anti-aircraft fire from German guns in the trees and fields below destroyed a number of the C-47 Skytrains, which carried the paratroopers. This forced the planes to evade and forced many off target, leading to most of the C-47s dropping the paratroopers at the wrong time and location. The situation became even more chaotic as German machine guns targeted planes and floating paratroopers alike. One paratrooper, as he descended, ended up having his parachute snag on a church steeple. He was left hanging in midair and was forced to play dead for 2 hours as the Germans moved around beneath him. Scattered all over Normandy, the paratroopers began to slowly link up with one another and conduct their missions. The paratroopers captured St. MacLeod and were successful in securing most of their objectives, but it took them the better part of a week to successfully block a few of the causeways leading to Utah Beach, even though that was an early objective. Hours later, the largest amphibious landing force ever assembled began moving through the storm-tossed waters toward the beaches of Normandy. More than 5,000 ships and landing craft carrying 176,000 troops and supplies crossed the channel from England to France, while more than 11,000 aircraft were mobilized to provide air cover and support for the invasion. Most of the Americans were packed into flat-bottom Higgins boats launched from troop transports 10 miles from the French coastline. The amphibious invasions began at 6:30 a.m. Planners had divided the landing zone into 5 separate beaches. The British and Canadians landed at Juno, Gold, and Sword beaches. The Americans landed at Omaha and Utah beaches. The British and Canadians overcame light opposition to capture their beaches, as did the Americans at Utah Beach. The fiercest fighting was on Omaha Beach, where the enemy was positioned on steep cliffs that commanded the long, flat shoreline. Troops leapt from their landing boats and were pinned down for hours by murderous machine gun fire that turned the beach into a vast killing field. Lieutenant Colonel Bill Friedman said, "If you stayed there, you were going to die. We just had to try to get to the bottom of the cliffs on which the Germans had mounted their defenses." End quote. The German defenses on Omaha included 3 defensive lines before the beach: iron gate structures with mines, followed by heavy stakes positioned at a slant with mines on top, and the final line was made with iron hedgehogs which were placed just offshore to wreck landing crafts. Behind the beach were anti-tank ditches and many strong points established on the cliffs behind. Throughout the landing, German gunners poured deadly fire into the ranks of the invading Americans. Bodies lay on the beach or floated in the water. Men sought refuge behind beach obstacles, which offered some safety at the base of the cliff. Destroyed craft and vehicles littered the water's edge and beach. The troops on the beach were left on their own and realized that the exits were not the way off. Slowly and in small groups, they scaled the cliffs. Meanwhile, Navy destroyers steamed in and, scraping their bottoms in the shallow water, blasted the German fortifications at point-blank range. By 12 noon, German fire had noticeably decreased as the defensive positions were taken from the rear. Then, one by one, the exits were opened. By midday, the Americans had surmounted the cliffs and taken Omaha Beach. According to some estimates, 2,000 soldiers alone had died on Omaha Beach, and more than 4,000 total Allied troops had lost their lives in the D-Day invasion, with thousands more wounded or missing. Less than a week later, on June 11th, the beaches were fully secured and over 326,000 troops, more than 50,000 vehicles, and some 100,000 tons of equipment had landed at Normandy. In the coming weeks, the Allies fought their way across the Normandy countryside in the face of determined German resistance, as well as a dense landscape of marshes and hedgerows. By the end of June, the Allies had seized the vital port of Cherbourg, landed approximately 850,000 men and 150,000 vehicles in Normandy, and were poised to continue their march across France. The Normandy invasion began to turn the tide against the Nazis. It was a significant psychological blow that also prevented Hitler from sending troops from France to build up his eastern front against the advancing Soviets. The following spring, on May 8, 1945, the Allies formally accepted the unconditional surrender of Nazi Germany. Hitler had committed suicide a week earlier, on April 30th. I'd like to thank you all for joining me for today's episode, and if you enjoyed it, click like, and if you're watching on YouTube, hit subscribe. Thanks so much, and I'll see you all next time.